Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 when we're done. Let's get started. Claire Bennett stood in the bridal suite of the Rosewood Hotel in downtown Chicago, staring at her reflection in the floor-length mirror. The ivory lace gown hugged her frame perfectly, its delicate beading catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Her blonde hair was styled in soft waves that cascaded over her shoulders, and her makeup was flawless, natural, radiant, bride-perfect. She looked like a woman about to marry the love of her life. She looked like someone ready to walk down the aisle with joy in her heart. Both were lies. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, smoothing down the silk skirt with trembling hands. "Just get through the ceremony, smile for the photos, and then freedom." The wedding wasn't supposed to be like this. When her grandmothers will stipulated that Claire had to be married by her 30th birthday or lose her inheritance. The family estate, the trust fund, everything. She'd thought she had time. But her manipulative ex-fiancé had dragged out their relationship for years before leaving her 6 months before the deadline. Desperate and cornered, she'd agreed to a marriage of convenience with Alexander Prescott, a name her family's lawyers had presented as the perfect solution. She'd never even met him. All she knew was that Alexander Prescott was the heir to a pharmaceutical empire, that he had his own reasons for needing a quick marriage, and that after 1 year, they'd divorce quietly and both walk away with what they needed. A business arrangement. Nothing more. But Claire couldn't do it. She couldn't trap herself in a loveless marriage, even a temporary one, even for millions of dollars. So she'd done something desperate, something crazy. She'd hired someone to ruin the wedding. Her phone buzzed on the vanity. A message from the service she'd found through a friend of a friend, DiscreetDisruptions.com, a company that specialized in, as their website put it, planned chaos for those who need an exit strategy. Your specialist is on site. Operation will commence as scheduled. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. In 20 minutes, during the ceremony, someone would burst through the doors and create a scene dramatic enough to derail everything. She'd paid $2,000 for a stranger to stand up and object, to claim she was making a terrible mistake, to cause enough chaos that she could escape without anyone blaming her. It seemed insane, but it was cheaper than a lifetime of regret. She grabbed her bouquet, white roses and peonies that smelled like hope and lies, and headed toward the door. Her maid of honor would be waiting outside to escort her downstairs, where 200 guests were already seated in the hotel's grand ballroom, where Alexander Prescott was supposedly waiting at the altar. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong in a luxury hotel on a Saturday afternoon. A commotion in the hallway. Raised voices. The sharp click of expensive shoes on marble floors, moving fast. Claire opened the door just as a man came striding down the corridor toward her suite, security guards scrambling behind him, trying to keep up. He was tall, devastatingly handsome in a tailored black tuxedo that fit him like it had been painted on. Dark blonde hair swept back from a face that was all sharp cheekbones and intense blue eyes. There was something commanding about him, something that made people instinctively step aside. He stopped directly in front of her door, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Claire Bennett. His voice was deep, smooth, with an edge of urgency. She managed a nod, her grip tightening on her bouquet. "Yes, I'm Alexander Prescott." He glanced over his shoulder at the security guards, then back at her, his jaw tight. "And we need to talk. Right now." Claire's mind went blank. This was her groom. This man who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement, who carried himself like he owned the building. Which, for all she knew, he probably did. But the ceremony is a mistake. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I'm assuming you're having the same doubts I am, which is why I need to tell you something before we walk down that aisle." Her heart was racing now, confusion and panic swirling together. "What are you talking about?" Alexander's blue eyes searched her face, and for a moment, something vulnerable flickered in them. "I hired someone to object to this wedding, to stop it before it starts." He paused, his expression both rueful and desperate. "I'm guessing, based on the look on your face, that I'm not the only one." The bouquet slipped from Claire's fingers, white petals scattering across the marble floor like snow. Claire stared at Alexander Prescott, her mind refusing to process what he'd just said. Behind him, the security guards had stopped their pursuit, clearly recognizing who he was. One of them was already speaking urgently into a radio, probably alerting someone downstairs that the groom had gone rogue. "You hired someone to ruin our wedding?" she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Apparently not as effectively as you did." A hint of a smile tugged at his lips, though his eyes remained serious. When were they supposed to make their dramatic entrance? During the vows. Claire pressed a hand to her forehead, feeling absurdly close to hysterical laughter. "What about yours?" "Right after the processional. Someone was supposed to claim I was already married." He glanced down the hallway again, then back at her. "We should probably call them both off before this turns into a circus." "Too late for that," Claire muttered, but she was already pulling out her phone. Her fingers fumbled over the screen as she typed out a frantic message to discreetdisruptions.com. "Abort. Do not proceed. I repeat, abort mission." Alexander was doing the same, his expression focused as he tapped rapidly on his phone. When he looked up, there was something almost sheepish in his eyes. "I should probably explain." "You think?" Claire bent to gather her scattered bouquet, grateful for something to do with her hands. The roses were crushed, petals bruised, and falling away. "Fitting. My father arranged this marriage to secure a merger with your family's pharmaceutical patents." I agreed because he stopped, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting it in a way that made him look more human, less untouchable. "Because I've spent my entire life doing what my family expects. And I thought one more sacrifice wouldn't matter." Claire straightened, clutching the ruined bouquet to her chest. Until last night, when I realized I was about to marry a complete stranger just to make my father happy. His blue eyes met hers with startling honesty. "I couldn't do it. But I also couldn't just walk away and face the consequences. So I hired someone to give me an out. My grandmother's will," Claire said quietly. "If I don't marry by 30, I lose everything. My family found you, presented you as the solution, and I was desperate enough to agree." She laughed, a bitter sound. "And then too much of a coward to go through with it." "That's not cowardice." Alexander took a step closer. "That's self-preservation." Downstairs, she could hear the string quartet starting up, playing the pre-ceremony music. In minutes, the wedding coordinator would come looking for her. Her family would be wondering where she was. 200 guests would be checking their watches. "So what do we do now?" Claire asked. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "We make a choice that's actually ours." Before Claire could respond, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Her mother's voice, sharp with concern, cut through the air. "Claire? What's going on up here? Why is security?" Victoria Bennett rounded the corner and froze, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Her daughter in her wedding gown, standing in the hallway with her groom, rose petals scattered across the marble floor like evidence of some small disaster. "We need a moment," Alexander said smoothly, his entire demeanor shifting. The vulnerability Claire had glimpsed moments ago vanished, replaced by cool authority. "Alone." Victoria's perfectly lipsticked mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't accustomed to being dismissed, especially not on her daughter's wedding day. But something in Alexander's tone, in the way he positioned himself slightly in front of Claire, made her hesitate. "The ceremony starts in 15 minutes, she said finally, her gaze shifting between them with obvious suspicion. "We're aware," Alexander replied. Victoria lingered another moment, clearly torn between maternal concern and social propriety, before retreating back down the hallway with a final warning look at Claire. The moment she disappeared, Alexander's shoulders dropped slightly. "Your mother is terrifying. You have no idea." Claire leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. "What were you saying about making a choice that's ours?" "I have a proposal." He glanced toward the elevator, calculating. "What if we go through with the wedding, but on our terms? No family interference, no merger obligations, no grandmothers will hanging over your head. Just two people who make an agreement and actually get to know each other first." Claire blinked. "You want to marry me anyway? I want to not waste this opportunity." He gestured at the hallway, the hotel, the ceremony waiting below. "We both need this marriage legally. But we don't have to let our families control what happens after. We could buy ourselves time, figure out if there's something real here, or at least become friends before we're legally bound to each other for a year. It was insane. He was a stranger, even if he was technically her groom. But Claire found herself considering it, found herself drawn to the honesty in his eyes, the way he'd admitted his own desperation instead of pretending this was normal. "And if we hate each other?" she asked. "Then we divorce in a year, exactly as planned, and walk away with our inheritances intact." Alexander extended his hand. "But at least we'll have tried something honest in the middle of all this manipulation." Claire looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her want to take the risk. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. "One condition," she said. "No more hired saboteurs." His laugh was warm and genuine. "Deal." The ceremony had been a blur. Claire remembered walking down the aisle on her father's arm, remembered Alexander's steady blue gaze as she approached, remembered saying, "I do," to a man she'd met 30 minutes earlier. The guests had applauded, champagne had flowed, and through it all, Alexander had played his part perfectly. The attentive groom, the devoted fiancé who'd supposedly swept her off her feet during a whirlwind romance their families had invented. Now, hours later, they'd finally escaped. The Rosewood had a private terrace that overlooked Lake Michigan, and Claire had suggested they slip away from the reception while everyone was distracted by dinner service. Alexander had agreed immediately, loosening his bow tie as they stepped into the cool evening air. "I don't think I've ever been to a wedding where the bride and groom were actively avoiding their own reception," he said, leaning against the stone balustrade. Claire kicked off her heels, sighing with relief as her feet touched the cool pavement. First time for everything. She joined him at the railing, looking out at the dark water stretching endlessly before them. The city lights reflected off the surface like scattered diamonds. "So, Alexander Prescott, tell me something real. Call me Alex." He shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket and draped it over her shoulders when she shivered. "And what do you want to know? Why you really agreed to this?" Claire pulled the jacket tighter, breathing in the scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely him. "You're not exactly hurting for money or status. You didn't need this marriage." Alex was quiet for a long moment, his profile sharp against the night sky. "My father has been grooming me to take over Prescott Pharmaceuticals since I was 18. Every decision I've made, every relationship I've had, every career move, he's orchestrated all of it." His jaw tightened. This marriage was supposed to be the final piece. Merge with your family's patents, consolidate power, create a dynasty. But I'm 32 years old, and I've never made a single choice that was actually mine." He turned to face her, and in the dim light from the terrace, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I thought if I went through with this wedding, at least I'd be doing it on my terms by sabotaging it." "Pathetic, right?" "Not pathetic," Claire said softly. "I get it. My whole life has been about meeting expectations. Perfect daughter, perfect grades, perfect career. And when my grandmother added perfect marriage to the list, I just..." She trailed off, looking down at the simple platinum band now circling her finger. "I broke. So we're both broken." Alex smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Great foundation for a marriage. Or maybe we're both finally being honest." Claire met his gaze. "That's something." They'd return to the reception eventually, slipping back into their roles as the happy newlyweds. But something had shifted between them on that terrace, some invisible barrier lowered. Claire found herself actually relaxing as Alex guided her around the ballroom, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "There's someone you should meet," her father said, appearing at her elbow with a silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit. "Claire, this is Richard Morrison, CEO of Morrison Medical Supply." Richard, my daughter, and her new husband. Claire's stomach tightened. She knew exactly who Richard Morrison was, the man who'd rejected her proposal for a hospital partnership 3 months ago, citing her lack of business acumen, despite her MBA and years of experience managing her family's charitable foundation. "Congratulations," Morrison said, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. His gaze slid dismissively over Claire before settling on Alex with obvious interest. "Prescott, I've been hoping to speak with you about the new cardiac device your company is developing." "Of course." Alex's voice was pleasant, but Claire felt his hand tighten almost imperceptibly against her back. "Though I have to say, I'm surprised you're not more interested in speaking with my wife. She's the real visionary when it comes to medical innovation." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Oh, I wasn't aware Mrs. Prescott was involved in the pharmaceutical industry." "She's not. She's too busy revolutionizing healthcare delivery." Alex turned to Claire, and the pride in his eyes made her breath catch. "Tell him about your foundation's rural clinic initiative." Claire hesitated, remembering Morrison's condescending dismissal of that very project. But Alex was looking at her with such genuine interest, such confidence in her abilities, that she found herself speaking. "We're developing a network of mobile clinics to serve underserved communities across the Midwest," she said, lifting her chin. "Telemedicine integration, preventive care focus, partnerships with local hospitals for emergency transfers. We've reduced emergency room visits by 30% in our pilot region." "Impressive," Morrison said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Of course, such charitable ventures rarely scale effectively. "Actually, Morrison Medical turned down the opportunity to supply those clinics," Alex said smoothly. "Their loss. We're now in talks with Kemper Supplies, who understand the market potential of sustainable healthcare solutions." He smiled, sharp as a blade. "I believe they're projected to overtake your market share within 2 years." Morrison's face flushed. He muttered something about needing to speak with someone else and disappeared into the crowd. Claire stared at Alex. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." His expression softened as he looked down at her. "He dismissed you. And your work is extraordinary, Claire." Someone needed to make sure he knew it. Something warm unfurled in Claire's chest, something dangerous and thrilling. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, a temporary solution. But the way Alex was looking at her, the way he defended her without hesitation, it felt real. Terrifyingly, impossibly real. The evening was winding down, guests beginning to drift toward the exits, when Claire noticed the shift in Alex's demeanor. His smile turned brittle, his posture rigid. She followed his gaze to the ballroom entrance where a man stood surveying the room with predatory interest. He was tall, dark-haired, wearing a suit that screamed money and power. But there was something cold about him, something that made Claire's instincts scream warning. "Who is that?" she whispered. "Marcus Vance." Alex's voice was tight. "My father's former business partner. Now my biggest competitor." Before Claire could respond, Vance was crossing the ballroom toward them, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Alexander." What a surprise. He extended his hand, forcing Alex to shake it. "I wasn't aware you were getting married. The invitation must have gotten lost." "It was a small ceremony," Alex said evenly. "Family only." Clearly, Vance's gaze slid to Claire, assessing. "Mrs. Prescott. Charming. Though I have to say, this all seems rather sudden. Just last month at the shareholders' meeting, Alexander, you were quite vocal about focusing on business rather than personal entanglements." Claire felt Alex's hand find hers, his grip steady and reassuring. "Plans change when you meet the right person." "How romantic." Vance's smile didn't waver. "And convenient timing, given the merger your father's been pushing. The Bennett pharmaceutical patents, if I'm not mistaken." He looked at Claire with mock sympathy. "I do hope this isn't just a business arrangement. Those tend to end so messily." "Our marriage is none of your concern," Claire said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "Of course not." Vance pulled out his phone, swiping through it casually. "Though I am curious about something. This morning, I received an interesting call from a company called Discrete Disruptions. Apparently, someone hired them for a job at the Rosewood Hotel today, then canceled at the last minute." His eyes locked onto Alex's. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" The blood drained from Claire's face. Alex's expression remained carefully neutral, but she felt his hand tighten around hers. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Alex said. Vance pocketed his phone. "Well, congratulations on your marriage. I'm sure it will be very successful." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. "For however long it lasts." He walked away, leaving a chill in his wake. "Alex," Claire breathed. "How does he know?" "I don't know." His jaw was tight. "But we need to find out." They'd retreated to the honeymoon suite after Vance's departure, both too unsettled to maintain their performance for the remaining guests. The suite was absurdly luxurious, floor-to-ceiling windows, a king-sized bed draped in silk, champagne chilling in a silver bucket. Under different circumstances, It might have been romantic. I need to make some calls, Alex said, already pulling out his phone. Find out how Vance got that information. He disappeared onto the balcony, his voice low and urgent as he spoke to someone. Claire kicked off her heels again and wandered around the suite, restless. This was supposed to be simple. Get married, maintain appearances for a year, get divorced. But nothing about today had been simple, and Marcus Vance's knowing smile had shattered whatever illusion of control they'd managed to build. She found herself drawn to Alex's discarded tuxedo jacket, draped over a chair near the desk. His wallet had slipped partially out of the inner pocket, and beside it, folded papers peeked from another pocket. Claire knew she shouldn't look. Privacy, trust, all the things a real marriage required. But this wasn't a real marriage, was it? She pulled out the papers and unfolded them. Legal documents, dense with terminology she had to read twice to understand. But certain phrases jumped out at her, each one a small knife to the chest. Marriage of convenience, 12-month duration, assets remain separate, termination clause effective upon completion of merger. And then, in a section marked Additional Provisions, Party A acknowledges this arrangement serves primarily as legal protection during corporate restructuring. Party B's inheritance claim provides convenient justification for timeline. Convenient justification. Claire's hands trembled. Of course. This whole thing, the wedding, the terrace conversation, his defense of her work at the reception, it was all calculated. She was convenient. A useful cover story while Alex navigated whatever corporate warfare he was engaged in with Vance. The sliding door opened and Alex stepped back inside. I think I know how Vance found out. Someone at the agency must have. He stopped, seeing her face. Claire? What's wrong? She held up the papers, hating how her voice shook. Convenient justification? Legal protection? Her laugh was bitter. And here I thought we were being honest with each other. Alex's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that looked almost like panic. Those documents. Claire, let me explain. Don't. She dropped the papers on the desk. I get it. I do. This was always business. I just forgot for a minute. That's not what this is. Then what is it, Alex? Alex reached for her, but Claire stepped back. Those papers were drawn up 3 weeks ago by my father's attorneys. Before I ever agreed to this marriage. Before I met you. That doesn't make it better. It makes it context. His voice was strained. My father wanted ironclad legal protection for the merger. I signed them because at the time, that's all this was supposed to be. A transaction. And now, Claire's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not tonight. Not over this. Now everything's different. Alex ran a hand through his hair, frustration, and something rawer bleeding into his expression. Claire, what happened today? The terrace, the reception, defending you to Morrison. None of that was performance. I thought you knew that. Before Claire could respond, her phone buzzed. Then Alex's. Then both phones began ringing simultaneously. Alex answered first, his face going pale as he listened. A pause. How many people? Another pause, longer this time. I understand. He lowered the phone, looking at Claire with something close to dread. We need to go downstairs. Why? What happened? Marcus Vance just sent a mass email to every guest at our wedding, including the press contacts my father invited. Alex's jaw was tight. He attached copies of both our contracts with discrete disruptions. The sabotage orders. Everything. Claire's world tilted. No, that's not possible. I deleted everything. He must have hacked the agency's servers. Alex was already moving toward the door. Claire, I'm sorry, but we need to get ahead of this before. Her phone rang again. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. With shaking hands, Claire answered. Mom, get down here right now. Victoria's voice was ice. Both of you. The entire ballroom has seen it. Do you have any idea what you've done? The line went dead. They rode the elevator in silence, the descending numbers matching the sinking feeling in Claire's stomach. When the doors opened to the mezzanine level, they could hear the chaos before they saw it. Raised voices, gasps, the unmistakable sound of a scandal detonating in real time. The remaining guests had gathered in clusters, phones out, faces shocked and delighted in equal measure. Claire's father stood near the bar, his face purple with rage. Her mother was surrounded by concerned friends, her carefully maintained composure cracking. And Marcus Vance stood in the center of it all, holding a champagne flute, wearing a smile of pure triumph. "Ah, the happy couple," he announced as they approached. "Care to make a toast?" Claire didn't remember making the decision to run. One moment she was standing in the ballroom with 200 pairs of eyes dissecting her. The next she was in the lobby, then pushing through the hotel's revolving doors into the cold Chicago night. Behind her, she heard Alex calling her name, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The humiliation was crushing, suffocating. Her family's faces, her father's rage, her mother's devastation, the satisfaction in Marcus Vance's eyes. Every guest with their phones out, already texting, posting, sharing the story of the year. The billionaire marriage that was built on lies. She managed to hail a cab, climbing in before Alex could catch up. "Just drive," she told the confused driver. "Please." Through the rear window, she watched Alex standing on the sidewalk in his tuxedo, looking lost and furious and heartbreakingly alone. Then the cab turned a corner and he disappeared. Claire gave the driver her townhouse address and slumped against the seat, still wearing her wedding dress, her makeup smeared, her carefully constructed life in ruins. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text messages, calls, notifications flooding in like a tsunami. She turned it off. The drive back to her modest neighborhood felt like traveling between worlds. From the glittering Rosewood with its marble and champagne to her quiet street, with its maple trees and normal people living normal lives. Lives that didn't implode spectacularly in front of 200 witnesses. Inside her townhouse, Claire finally let herself fall apart. She collapsed on her sofa still in the wedding gown, tears soaking into the expensive lace. Everything she'd tried to avoid, the judgment, the pity, the confirmation that she wasn't enough, had happened anyway. Worse than she'd imagined. But as the tears slowed and exhaustion took over, something else emerged beneath the humiliation. Relief. She'd spent so long trying to meet impossible expectations. Her grandmother's will, her family's standards, society's definition of success. She'd been willing to marry a stranger, to fake an entire relationship, to sacrifice her own happiness just to prove she was worthy. And for what? Claire looked around her small townhouse, the cozy furniture she'd chosen herself, the artwork from local galleries, the books stacked everywhere because she'd never had enough shelves. This was her life. Imperfect, modest, but real. She didn't need her grandmother's inheritance to be successful. She didn't need a billionaire husband to be worthy. She just needed to be herself. Claire woke the next morning still wearing her wedding dress, her face puffy from crying, her phone still turned off. Sunlight streamed through her windows, aggressively cheerful. She'd married a stranger yesterday, been publicly humiliated by his rival, run away from her own wedding reception. It was barely 8 a.m., and already someone was knocking on her door. She considered ignoring it, but the knocking persisted, patient and steady. With a groan, Claire pulled herself off the sofa and shuffled to the door, not bothering to check her appearance. Whoever it was could deal with seeing a bride in ruins. She opened the door and froze. Alex stood on her doorstep, and he looked almost as terrible as she felt. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo anymore, just jeans and a simple black sweater, his hair unstyled, dark circles under his eyes. No limousine idled at the curb. No security detail hovered nearby. Just him, holding 2 coffee cups and looking uncertain in a way that made him seem younger, more vulnerable. "I know you probably don't want to see me," he said before she could speak. "And I'll leave if you ask me to. But I needed to say something first." Claire should close the door, should protect herself from whatever new disaster he might bring. But something about the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he stood there without any of yesterday's polish or power, made her hesitate. "How did you find my address?" "Wedding paperwork." A ghost of a smile. "We're legally married, remember? I'm allowed to know where my wife lives." "For now," Claire said, but she stepped back, letting him in. Alex handed her one of the coffees and stood awkwardly in her small living room, looking around at the books and artwork and comfortable chaos of her real life. "I like your place. It's you. You don't know me well enough to know what's me. I know more than you think." He set his coffee down, his expression serious. "I know you're brilliant and kind, and that you've spent your whole life trying to meet other people's expectations. I know you care more about helping people than making money. I know you hired someone to sabotage our wedding because you were brave enough to choose yourself, even when it cost you everything. Claire's throat tightened. Alex, those legal documents you found. I had my attorney destroy them last night. No merger clause, no corporate protection, no convenient justification. He took a step closer. I don't want a marriage of convenience anymore, Claire. I want a chance at something real. We barely know each other. Then let's change that. His blue eyes held hers with devastating honesty. No families, no expectations, no timelines. Just us, figuring this out together. And if it doesn't work, if we realize we're not right for each other, then we walk away. But at least we'll know we tried something honest. Claire looked at him. This man who'd defended her to Morrison, who'd looked lost on the sidewalk when she ran, who was standing in her living room without any of his armor, offering her something terrifying and real. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. Alex smiled, soft and genuine. But I think we might be worth the risk. Claire set down her coffee and took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, the steady certainty of his grip. Outside, her neighborhood was waking up, neighbors walking dogs, cars starting, normal life continuing. And maybe, just maybe, she and Alex could find their own version of normal. Not perfect or polished or what anyone expected. Just real. Okay, she said. Let's try. His smile could have lit up the entire city.